We start. Can we start? S'il vous plaît. Let's start. Today I'm speaking like Charlene. We start. You want to do the mic? Nobody? You? No, Hugo maybe, or Virginia. Of course. Of course. Of course. Let's start. Jesus. Cara. O quê? Uma cara como? Usa um telemóvel decente. We start. Let's start. Queres falar? Não queres falar? Ok. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are going to watch a small documentary called HANDPAS. As you can see, it's that means hands from the past. Hands as hand stencil. The marks that people did in cave walls more than 20 or 30,000 years ago. And why this documentary? First of all, this was a documentary that was made in 2016, and it was a project, HANDPAS project, that involved the Extremadura region in Spain, with partnership with ITM and SESMAP, a museum of rock art from Pinerolo in Italy. And the idea of this project, this was a European funded project from Creative Europe. And the idea was, actually I think this project is really clever, because it involved the documentation of whole hand stencils that we found in Paleolithic art in Iberian Peninsula. Well, started with the Iberian Peninsula, but the idea was to do the documentation of whole hand stencils in Europe. And we managed to do most of them. And also involving communication of science. So, how to better communicate a scientific project that wants to deal with one of the most fascinating and difficult questions that we have right now when we talk about Paleolithic art in Europe. That is, did Neanderthals did rock art or not? So, for 30,000 years, more or less, 20,000 years, we had, well, this is what science says, we had two different species living in Europe. Homo sapiens, us. I mean, there were more species, but the most known, most common would be Homo sapiens, us, and Neanderthals. And there was this old idea that Neanderthals didn't have any capacity of making symbolic things, of thinking creative, of thinking in abstract way. And then, some years ago, with some research projects, some datations of some rock art that was found in caves in Spain actually start giving us dates older than the presence of Homo sapiens in Spain. So if Homo sapiens didn't do it, because the datations are older than their presence, who did this? And these questions start making made a big discussion on the possibility of Neanderthals have or not capacity of making art or marks in a wall in a symbolic way. This is a fascinating question, actually, and is still not resolved. Many projects still exist that are trying to prove or not the data that started more or less in 2012-13. This documentary came in a time where some of the datations were starting to be really old. So a little older than the earliest presence of Homo sapiens in Spain. So the documentary arises the question, is it or not possible? And from how many different point of views can we see this discussion, okay? This is the scientific question. The didactic question was, how can we actually talk with the public that has no comprehension of the scientific data? How can we explain them this question, all this research? So the idea was, along with the scientific work, to make a documentary, not only showing how can we find out about the old datations, but actually we recreated prehistoric camps and the ways of living of both species to try to recreate the possibilities, the different questions that arise that come with the scientific speech. ITM was part of this project with the documentary part. So because we have a lot of experience with the archaeological experimentation. Remember how we had the dinner last Friday, right? There was a lot of prehistoric skills involved in cooking, several things. So the team of ITM entered in this part of the didactic recreation, so probably you will actually know some of the people that appear in the documentation. Do you want me to stop speaking? Virginia was like, shut up and put the video. I know, I'm kidding. Yeah. Okay. So, what do we want today? We're going to watch the documentary. And then, we actually would like you to comment on this, on the question, if you understand the question, and what can we actually discuss from the possibility or not of a different species that for a long time was considered to be almost like inferior, that it's actually giving new scientific data to new possibilities of knowing other people, actually. So enjoy. It's 30 minutes, more or less. It's with the English subtitles, okay? Because there's a lot of researchers that speak many languages, but it has...
We don't know how they spoke, but we do know what they were like and the symbols they used to express themselves. They made...
Estamos en la parte más profunda de una cueva, al lado de una mano hecha en negativo. Esta es posiblemente una de las representaciones más antiguas que el hombre y su capacidad simbólica tuvo la capacidad de hacer. Posiblemente, hace más de 30.000 años, grupos de humanos entraron en esta cueva y dejaron su huella sobre esta pared. Estudiar esa huella, estudiar por qué se hizo, tratar de entender qué motivó a aquellos primeros pobladores a realizar esta mano, qué se esconde detrás de esta mano, cómo se hizo, es el objetivo fundamental de HANDPAS Project, Manos del Pasado, nuestro proyecto de investigación, un proyecto que se está haciendo realidad gracias al programa creativo de la Unión Europea. Mediante él, tratamos de averiguar por qué se hizo esta mano? Vamos a preguntarle a los mejores especialistas en la materia. Vamos a acudir a diferentes países para hablar sobre cronología, para hablar sobre interpretación. Vamos a recrear las formas de vida. ¿Por qué? Porque HANDPAS Project no es solamente un proyecto de investigación. HANDPAS es algo más. Es volver a darle vida a estas manos. ¿Cómo? A través de grupos de recreación prehistórica que van a hacer posible volver a ese mundo de transición de hace más de 40.000 años, donde posiblemente en la península ibérica o en Europa convivieron las dos grandes especies fundamentales y protagonistas de ese momento, neandertales y cromañones. ¿Se encontrarían o no se encontrarían? ¿Se amarían o no se amarían? ¿Serían capaces todos de hacer representaciones como esta? ¿O era un motivo que únicamente fueron capaces de hacer una de esas dos especies? Toda esta serie de incógnitas son las que vamos a tratar de desvelar con nuestro proyecto.
Hands from the past. We are in the Iberian Peninsula between the year 45,000 and 35,000 BC. Two groups of humans live side by side here. The Neanderthals that occupied Europe throughout the whole of the Middle Paleolithic period and who at present are getting to know the arrival of a new species, Homo sapiens, who coming from Africa after crossing the Near East will gradually spread across all of Europe and come into contact with the Neanderthals.
Eu penso que nós temos que olhar para a grande discussão que se faz já nos últimos 15 anos sobre a relação entre os primeiros homens modernos que chegam à Península e os últimos neandertais, em primeiro lugar, à luz das estratigrafias. E o que as estratigrafias nos dizem é que existirão momentos de provável contacto, mas nós não temos evidências diretas, claras, indiscutíveis, de junção dessas duas grandes comunidades. É praticamente impossível pensar que não se cruzaram, mas e também há muitos lugares, muitos sítios arqueológicos sem vestígios osteológicos, sem ossos, em que nós podemos supor que podem ser comunidades de neandertais com indústrias de tipo paleolítico superior ou com arte rupestre, mas nós não temos essas evidências diretas. Isso é a primeira questão. A segunda questão é que dados que temos hoje a partir de estudos de ADN, por exemplo, ou de datações absolutas, abriram de facto uma discussão importante sobre a possibilidade de os neandertais no sul da Europa, não apenas na Península Ibérica, também na Itália, terem perdurado até mais tarde, mas não são resultados inequívocos. Estas datações estão em revisão, por um lado, e as análises da ADN são discutidas entre os especialistas. Nós não temos nenhumas evidências indiscutíveis de miscigenação entre neandertais e homens modernos. Dito isto, não temos nenhuma razão para excluir essa possibilidade. Uma visão largamente racista sobre os neandertais que os considerou como uma espécie inferior. Nós hoje sabemos que isso é errado, não apenas, digamos, do ponto de vista ético, mas é errado cientificamente, que levou a pensar que por serem inferiores seriam extintos, ou seriam dizimados, ou qualquer coisa desse tipo. O mais provável é que isso não tenha acontecido. O mais provável na evolução entre fenótipos que são muito parecidos. Os neandertais não são muito diferentes de nós. O que é que isto quer dizer? Poderão perfeitamente estar, como muitos colegas sugerem, absorvidos pela população atual. seriam demograficamente menos expressivos, teriam, portanto, um peso menor. Como sabe, a análise de ADN que sugere isso. Eu sou muito cauteloso em relação às análises de ADN e, portanto, não é por causa das análises de ADN que penso isto. Penso, mais uma vez, em função de que nós não temos nenhuma evidência arqueológica de uma destruição brutal de grupos que viveram muito bem adaptados ao ecossistema europeu durante milhares de anos. Se de repente eles fossem massivamente extintos, nós deveríamos ter algum tipo de evidência arqueológica e não temos. O que é que eu penso que sobra disso tudo? Sobra disso tudo um quadro mais amplo. Esse quadro mais amplo diz-nos o seguinte: nos últimos 150 a 200 mil anos existiram contemporaneamente homens modernos e neandertais. Não há discussão sobre isso. É consensual. Sabemos também que não é porque anatomicamente surgiram os homens modernos que se começou a desenvolver pensamento simbólico e expressões materiais disso. Há muitas décadas que se sabe isso, desde que se estudou lá a Apheleia e outros locais, sabemos que neandertais podiam gravar signos e, portanto, isso não é uma questão em discussão. Então, neste pano de fundo, aquilo que eu penso é que, é verdade, o período de 45, 35 mil anos é um período de transição, mas não é um período de transição, do meu ponto de vista, dos neandertais para os homens modernos. É um período de transição da evolução da espécie humana para um grau de complexidade maior, a partir do qual nós começamos sistematicamente a ter expressões simbólicas mais complexas.
The representations of hands are one of the most ancient themes of prehistoric Paleolithic art. Between France, Spain and Italy, there are currently 33 caves where these have been found, together with other types of themes, such as animals or abstract symbols that are difficult to interpret. How do we know when they were painted?
And I'm part of a team that is trying to determine the age of cave paintings around Europe. And what we're finding is that the earliest of these cave paintings dates from the period of the very first arrival of modern humans into Europe. So there are several methods that you can determine the age of cave paintings. The most common, perhaps, is to use radiocarbon dating, which is a dating method that's employed in all kinds of contexts by archaeologists. Now, the problem with radiocarbon dating is that it requires organic pigments to be present, so things like charcoal. And they are present in some paintings, but it looks like some of the very early paintings are done with mineral pigments, such as red ochre. And for these, radiocarbon dating just doesn't work. There is also a problem with radiocarbon in that you are actually removing part of the painting. So it's a destructive dating method. And in order to minimize the damage to the painting, very, very small samples are removed for radiocarbon, but this then creates problems with potential contamination. So we're using a different method. We're actually dating not the art itself, but we're dating calcium carbonate deposits that form underneath or on top of the art. These are commonly known in caves as stalagmites and stalactites, and you get very small ones forming on cave art. Now, when these form, they incorporate tiny traces of radioactive uranium, and it's the radioactive decay of uranium that tells us when the stalagmite formed, and if it formed on top of the art, it therefore gives us a minimum age for the art. Now, this is a relatively new dating method. It hasn't been really applied in large quantities to dating cave art before. So what we've had to do is make sure that we've got tests to ensure the reliability of our art. And one of the ways that we do this is we take multiple samples down the growth axis of the calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate forms a little bit like tree rings in laminations that date in sequence. And so by taking samples in sequence and getting ages that correspond to that sequence, we can show that our results are reliable. So this is a typical size sample that we take from on top of the cave art. It maybe weighs about 10 milligrams. You can just see a small amount of white powder. And that's the white powder that we've scraped from a single layer of calcite that's grown on top of a piece of art. And we might take samples from several of the layers because they grow in order, and then we can date them and show that the dates fall in order, which gives us a sense of the reliability of the technique. Now, within this powder, there is 1 part per billion of uranium, a really tiny trace amount. but it's the radioactive decay of this uranium that allows us to work out how much time has passed since this calcite formed on top of the art. So when we got our sample from the cave, usually in the form of a powder, the first step is to look at it under the microscope. And we're looking to see if it's contaminated by detritus. This can be dust or it can be little bits of pigment that have come off the painting. If we find these, we remove them because they bring with them uranium and thorium that we don't want. But if our sample is very contaminated, we might actually reject it at this stage. The next step is to dissolve the sample in acid so it becomes a solution. We then need to purify that solution and extract the uranium and thorium from the remaining calcium carbonate. And we do this using ion exchange chromatography. This is a plastic resin to which uranium and thorium will stick, but all the calcium and the carbonate will get washed through. That allows us to take a sample that is pure uranium and pure thorium. We then take this solution and we introduce it to our mass spectrometer. And this machine measures the ratio of uranium to thorium. And it's this ratio that gives us the age of the formation of the calcite. Once we have the age of formation of the calcite, we can then say something about the age of the art. If the calcite formed on top of the art, then it provides a minimum age for the art. But if the art was painted on the calcite, then in fact it provides a maximum age. And this is how we constrain the age of these Paleolithic paintings.
Before finding out the results that reveal the current date of Europe's most ancient prehistoric paintings, we are going to take a look at the technique used to execute the hands. They appear across all continents. And despite the distance and the different contexts, the manner of painting these types of representations is systematically repeated. There are basically three ways to paint hands: negative hands, positive hands, and those that combine both, using which we call a mixed technique.
Alors, les techniques elles-mêmes sont relativement complexes et il n'est pas toujours facile de les déterminer, d'autant plus que la très grande majorité de ces mains sont recouvertes de calcite. Néanmoins, un certain nombre d'analyses au microscope, là aussi, ou d'analyses de traces, ont permis de montrer que dans la grande majorité des sites, ce sont des mains négatives qui ont été réalisées par la méthode du crachis. Donc le peintre, si j'ose dire, la personne qui veut réaliser sa main, prend en bouche de la peinture liquide et crache des gouttelettes de colorant sur la paroi après avoir apposé sa main en pronation, c'est-à-dire la main paume contre la paroi. Donc c'est la majorité des mains qui ont été réalisées comme ça. Il existe néanmoins des sites où les techniques sont un petit peu différentes. Ainsi, dans la grotte de Gargaze, quelques mains négatives ont été réalisées au moyen d'un tampon. Donc la peinture a été tamponnée autour de la main. Il existe aussi à Gargaze une autre méthode que j'avais proposée il y a quelques années sur la base du fait que l'auréole de la main comprend des zones de densité différentes et que cette auréole est composée de petits cercles de couleurs. Sur la base aussi du fait que l'on ne voit pas les gouttelettes de couleur, j'avais proposé une technique qui donne les mêmes résultats, c'est la méthode de la vaporisation. Et donc on prend un vaporisateur que l'on trempe dans un pot de couleur et on souffle la peinture qui est mélangée intimement à l'air et qui forme donc un nuage coloré extrêmement homogène. Cette technique-là semble avoir été utilisée, ce que confirment indirectement les analyses au microscope électronique à balayage. Au lieu d'avoir une couleur qui est un petit peu épaisse et qui a été étendue, comme c'est le cas dans la méthode du tamponnage, on a de très fines gouttelettes de couleur qui ont été écrasées et qui pourraient donc correspondre à cette projection par vaporisation de couleurs. Une dernière question que l'on peut se poser, c'est le rôle du support pour ces mains négatives. Alors on sait maintenant que le support est intervenu à de nombreuses reprises pour la réalisation des animaux. On a en effet des concavités, des convexités qui ont été intégrées pour donner du relief aux animaux, pour faire en sorte qu'ils se présentent littéralement, qu'ils soient présentifiés dans la paroi. On peut se poser la question de savoir si il en va de même pour les mains négatives, et là la réponse est négative. Donc on sait qu'il n'y a pas de relief particulier qui ont été intégrés pour donner du relief, pour simuler le relief de la main. En revanche, le relief d'une manière ou d'une autre, la particularité du support d'une manière ou d'une autre intervient bien pour les mains négatives. Il est frappant de constater par exemple que de manière très générale, les mains négatives ont été disposées, ont été placées à l'endroit où il y a de petites concavités, donc dans des sortes de petites niches ou de petits creux de la paroi. À Gargaz, dans le sanctuaire des mains par exemple, c'est tout à fait caractéristique, mais même ici à Castillo, c'est également une caractéristique qui a été exploitée. Et donc, tout à fait à l'inverse de ce qui se passe pour de nombreux animaux représentés, ici la paroi sert en quelque sorte d'écrin pour recevoir la main négative.
Let's go back to the University of Southampton in order to finish the dating process of these representations.
So our results so far show that the earliest cave art in Europe dates to around 41,000 years ago. But these are minimum ages for the art because we're dating calcium carbonate deposits that form on top of it. So the art could conceivably be older than this. Now, 41,000 years ago is the time at which the first modern humans arrived in northern Spain, but also the time of the disappearance of the Neanderthals. So if this art is significantly older than 41,000, then we would have to assume that it was made by Neanderthals, and that's a very interesting proposition. However, at the moment we don't have the evidence to show this, but we are collecting more samples, and if we start getting dates that are significantly older than 41,000, then we will have to conclude that Neanderthals were the first humans to paint caves.
Desde el punto de vista de la estructura anatómica de un sapiens y de un neandertal, de un cromañón, de un neandertal, creo que no podríamos distinguir si una representación, si es que en algún momento los neandertales hicieron representaciones como estas de mano, creo que no podríamos distinguirlas bajo ningún concepto. Podríamos distinguirlas o seremos capaces, si encontramos alguna mano, que podamos fecharla, que digamos, esta mano, por aplicando las técnicas de uranio torio, porque haya desarrollado una colada de calcita por encima y esa colada la podamos fechar, y resulta que esa fecha nos da una cronología irrefutablemente neandertal, pues diremos, esta mano sí ha hecho, pero porque el dato no nos lo da en sí la huella que estamos viendo sobre la pared. El dato nos lo da una técnica de datación cronológica que nos ha permitido saber que esa mano fue hecha en un momento muy antiguo en el cual, por ejemplo, en la península ibérica no había grupos humanos cromañonos, no había grupos humanos de sapiens sapiens. Por tanto, ya no nos queda otra, es decir, bueno, pues en este momento es que aquí en la península no había sapiens. En ese momento los únicos que estaban habitando en esta zona eran neandertales, por tanto, si yo tengo esa cronología X, esta mano obviamente tiene que ser neandertal. A día de hoy eso no ha sucedido. Estamos en momentos muy de tránsito, hay una gran discusión precisamente por eso, porque no hay una prueba evidentísima, no hay una prueba irrefutable de que un símbolo como este o que esas capacidades simbólicas estuvieran poniéndose en marcha por parte de grupos neandertales.
Now, we're particularly interested in the age of the hand stencils in Maltravieso cave because the hand stencils are amongst the earliest cave art forms we find in northern Spain. And it may help us unravel the issue as to whether or not these were made by the earliest modern humans or were made by Neanderthals, because early modern humans arrived a bit later in Maltravieso than they did in northern Spain. So if we find the same age for the hand stencils in Maltravieso, we'll have a very different interpretation than if in fact they turn out to be later.
This brings about another question. The interpretation of the hands. Why? We know they appear in many caves in different positions in very diverse locations, sometimes at inaccessible points, other times in very visible areas and often in hidden spaces. Their appearance is due to an ideological universe of groups of humans who buried their dead and made contact with the spirits who lived behind the walls of the caves by symbolically touching them. The shamanic interpretation and the rites of passage are some of the hypotheses posed.
L'art des cavernes a toujours intéressé les gens depuis qu'il a été découvert et reconnu comme tel. Ça fait plus d'un siècle. Et les gens se sont toujours demandé pourquoi. Pourquoi les gens allaient dans les grottes il y a tant de milliers d'années pour faire ces dessins, et en particulier des mains négatives. L'une des interprétations les plus plausibles, c'est qu'ils l'ont fait dans le cadre d'une religion de type chamanique. C'est-à-dire qu'ils croyaient qu'il y avait des esprits, que ces esprits se trouvaient en particulier puissants dans les grottes, et ils allaient à leur rencontre pour capter leur pouvoir pour tous les problèmes de la vie, la santé, obtenir des chasses fructueuses, obtenir l'amour d'une femme qu'on aime, tous les problèmes de la vie. Et ces esprits, ils entraient en contact avec eux, en particulier avec un chaman. C'est-à-dire le chaman, c'est l'intermédiaire entre le monde spirituel, le monde des esprits, et le monde dans lequel on se trouve. C'est lui qui appelle les esprits, qui fait les cérémonies, qui entre en contact avec les esprits. Les gens aussi peuvent entrer directement en contact avec les esprits. Et cela explique par exemple que dans les grottes européennes, que ce soit en France ou en Espagne, très souvent les dessins ont été faits en se servant des courbes naturelles de la paroi, parce que les gens qui y allaient pensaient que ces reliefs représentaient des animaux esprits. Ils étaient là dans la roche, prêts à sortir. Et donc, on complétait les reliefs naturels pour dessiner les animaux, pour entrer en contact avec leur esprit. La main, c'est un peu ça aussi. Mettre la main contre la paroi, dessiner la main, soit en soufflant de la peinture, soit en dessinant une main, permet d'établir un contact direct entre celui qui le fait et les puissances surnaturelles qui se trouvent dans la paroi. Et ça, on le sait, parce qu'il n'y a pas que dans les grottes en France ou en Espagne où il y a des mains négatives. On a des mains négatives dans le monde entier, dans l'art rupestre du monde entier. Et là, souvent, on a les explications. Et la main sert à entrer en contact avec le monde surnaturel. Cette hypothèse est une hypothèse qui se fonde sur ce qu'on constate dans les grottes. Donc de ce point de vue, elle est archéologique, puisque ces mains, souvent, sont datées. On peut dire quand elles ont été faites, dans quelle culture elles ont été faites, mais c'est également anthropologique, puisque pour les explications, nous nous fondons sur l'ethnologie, sur ce qu'on sait de peuples qui font eux-mêmes ce type de mains, dans des contextes qui ne sont pas tellement anciens et pour lesquels nous avons les explications.
Allora, siamo convinti che l'arte preistorica delle mani costituisse un simbolo, fosse un rimando a un significato soggiacente, un significato che stava alle spalle di quella motivazione che portava a dipingere o disegnare delle mani sulle pareti delle grotte. E perché nelle grotte? E perché su quelle pareti? E perché le mani spesso non sono distese ma hanno delle dita ripiegate o addirittura mutilate? Non lo sappiamo. Non sappiamo nulla. Possiamo ipotizzare che queste mani venissero dipinte nel momento in cui si dovevano fare delle cerimonie, dei riti di iniziazione. Per esempio i giovani cacciatori che entravano nella cerchia più grande dei cacciatori, i cacciatori della tribù. Possiamo pensare che fossero mani femminili e che anche lì si trasmettessero dei segreti da madre in figlia, dei segreti che sono la continuità di una sorta di iniziazione. Tutto ciò naturalmente ci sfugge perché le mani del passato, le mani della preistoria, sono mute e non abbiamo la possibilità noi di farle parlare. Dirò le parole di Leroi-Gourhan: dobbiamo evitare di mettere nella bocca dell'uomo preistorico parole europee con accento bantu.
Like the sun setting under the ground, or like a river flowing into the moon, like silence that speaks, our investigations are perhaps that useless. Humans, we seek, we find, we lose, we start again. And there, in those today remote yet not unknown ends of the Pleistocene period, when we merged, or beforehand, art arose. Abstract thought arose, combined with the capacity to reflect the world that surrounded them like a mirror. And there, dancing or looking at the walls of the cave, and here, in the end, in our time, like you watching a screen. A loop, a spiral, an eternal game.
Oui, l'image de la main ne compte pas apparemment et pas tellement pour elle-même. Ce qui compte, c'est l'acte de faire la main. Donc, elle est le résultat d'un geste qui semble avoir compté de manière importante. On choisit l'endroit. Cet endroit est en relation directe avec des particularités, avec une morphologie particulière, soit de la paroi, soit de la grotte. Et dès qu'on a repéré cet endroit, on réalise l'image, et l'image comme telle a une importance.
And this is really interesting because these early non-figurative symbols, such as red discs and hand stencils that are around 40,000 years old, are also found in places as far away as Sulawesi, also dating to around 40,000 years. And this shows a connection between people painting caves in Europe and places that are 8,000 or 9,000 kilometers away. And that connection probably is related to the very first groups of humans to leave Africa, because we don't find cave painting in Africa at this early period. So we imagine that painting caves was a response to being in new environments, perhaps competing with other species such as Neanderthals or maybe the Denisovans and Homo floresiensis. And therefore they needed to deploy new ways of socially grouping themselves, and cave painting may have played a very big part of that. So these hand stencils that we find in El Castillo Cave and Maltravieso may in fact be the signatures of this colonization of modern humans of the Northern Hemisphere.
La nostra posizione è una posizione che non è recuperabile il pensiero dell'uomo preistorico, il pensiero specifico dell'uomo preistorico. Quello generale sì, ma quello specifico no. E quindi addentrarsi in ipotesi interpretative è come il funambolo che va sulla corda.
Bien, volvemos a donde comenzamos. Volvemos a nuestro panel con nuestra mano. Hemos tratado de entender, mediante un recorrido, hablando con los mejores especialistas, recreando las formas de vida de las personas que posiblemente fueron los protagonistas y los autores de esta mano, por qué se hicieron, cuándo se hicieron y cómo se hicieron estas manos. Esto ha sido HANDPAS Project, Manos del Pasado, nuestro proyecto de investigación. Esta otra.
Kátia, luz, por favor. Kátia Murta, obrigada. Who wants to start? Uma? Okay. Before your questions, an update. Hugo was like, update people. Okay, we wait. The researchers are like, update or not? Okay. Okay. He wants to see the questions first. Okay.
Okay, so I think there is one thing that I didn't quite well understood while watching the documentary. What is the proof, like the solid proof that you need to get to be sure about the fact that Neanderthals could have made those hands?
What is the proof that we need?
Yeah, which can be the solid proof that will end the debate?
Yeah, that was the update that Hugo didn't want me to tell you. I'll tell you. After this documentary was made more or less in 2016, the first dates that came, that the researcher was telling about, was 2012. So 2012, the first datations came and already showed that in that transition time that in archaeology we define as the Homo sapiens entering Europe and Iberian Peninsula and finding the Neanderthals. This is more or less 40,000 years ago. In 2012, these dates were giving, okay, the hand stencils are being dated in 42,000. At that time, there is no evidence of Homo sapiens in that places. So the first question arises, who did this? Was Neanderthals? Okay, so all the research was like, let's go back and see what we know about Neanderthals. Are they capable of this? Evidence says no. The shape of the brain, the tools they used, everything was pointing that Neanderthals did not have the capacity of making abstract and symbolic things. So the questions start to arise. And then you can actually put a lot in question. Is the method well done? Is the method well applied? Are the sites well dated? Is there a problem with the sites? There's many scientific questions that you can make. What happens after this documentary? So the documentary comes putting fire in the discussion, right? Let's actually put some questions and say yes or no. Are they capable or not? In 2012 and 18, I'm sorry, a new article came out with datations in 3 caves. Again, the hand stencils of the Maltravieso cave in Extremadura, the hand stencils of El Castillo in the north of Spain, and another cave in the south. So they dated one in the north, center, south. And the datations came actually quite earlier. They came from 50,000 and 66,000. At that time, absolutely there are no Homo sapiens in Spain, okay? So only Neanderthals there. And this article came to say, okay, is this the definitely proof, the ultimate proof that they actually did rock art? But then, why is the question still being discussed? Because many researchers came to put in question the method of datation, the knowledge that we already had from Neanderthals. Everything is still open. because you need much more proof than this, you need much more datation than this, maybe the oldest datation is wrong because the cave is a different system. The question, actually this discussion is still going on right now.
In this moment, we are dealing with a new project. You already listened about this First Start project that sometimes appear. We will have time to present you well the first time. And we are visit this team that is working with you and all the researchers that you saw in more than 30 caves, looking for new evidences, for more evidences that confirm, in fact, these 3-4 new data. And, of course, the discussion starts. We were in Isernia with some students that are here, and we have a discussion between the researchers, also related with this, because we have the lithic studies experts that have an idea, the culture arrives, have the genetic ones, and you know that Sven Pavel win the Nobel of Medicine because he reconstructed the ADN of Neanderthal, so we have a new method that we can start applying for all these questions. And we are also searching for this first start that usually the archaeologists don't look, because we are talking about points, lines, some very diffuse figures that were not supposed to be hard, and we can also discuss if it's rock art the good name of all this discussion. So the discussion is on. For us, it's very important to have your feedback because you come from different backgrounds, and usually we just discuss this between geologists and archaeologists and these physicists, and we think it's very useful to listen what is your idea, in fact, what you think about this.
Okay, my question is just the observation with the spirits. It was mentioned in the video. As Cami said, my question is a bit same with, what's the proof that it's linked with the spirits? It could be just the laser or something just they discovered?
Some of research, well, a part of the discussion has to enter on interpretation.
That so it's an interpretation, actually.
Yeah, that is, I think, the hardest part. You're talking about the spirits. How can we actually prove that it was linked with that?
Yes, because we also got to know that if we make it in the open air, it could be disappeared with the rain, water, or anything. So just they wanted to make it inside the cave so that they could see it later, or it's my interpretation. How can we only...
There are many interpretations that work in rock art. There's a lot of different interpretations. Okay. When you look inside the caves, in Europe we are talking about cave contexts, okay? Sometimes they are put in a very deep part of the cave, in a hidden part of the cave. It depends. And you can think about many different ways of why they did the hand specifically, okay? And you can make different interpretations. The shamanic interpretation that we saw, the representation, it's one type of interpretation that can be used to explain it, okay? The researcher that was talking about, John Klotz, it's one of the one of the researchers that actually started to develop more the shamanic interpretation for rock art. It doesn't mean that it's what it's going to explain the hand stencils, okay? It's one hypothesis, okay?
And just one thing more. Is there any other baby or the child handprint that we have found?
Yeah, a lot.
Oh, okay.
A lot. Recently, like last year, some researchers did a very detailed work on the hand stencil of Maltravieso, the cave that they were talking about, and they actually realized that most of the hands are from kids and women, and that there is a pattern of the way the hands are put in the walls are showing you a path inside the wall. Hands there, pointing a direction, hands on the other wall, pointing the opposite direction. and that most of the hands are from kids. There are several cases like that.
And is there footprints as well, like handprints, or
The painted footprints are no, but some caves actually have the real footprints of prehistoric people still preserved in the mud inside the cave.
But not like the handprint on the walls?
No, not that I remember, no.
I'm just want to come.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to ask to answer to the.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah.
About the fingerprint, you need to think about that the soil of the caves normally are like sediments, a little bit of sediments that are there, and if you pass on them, you will destroy what is on the floor. So you need to think about also the conservation in this way. On the wall, it's better the conservation. The conservation is better preserved.
In the other day in this area, I explained this also, but the people that in fact destroyed the evidences of rock art, much of them were archaeologists that were trying to make the excavation of, and they don't saw this kind of difficult art to identify it in the walls, and they look back, and sometimes they damage this kind of art evidence.
If you want to read the article that Sarah was speaking about, the one of the hands, the child and woman hands, we have the books in the ITM, so it's available. You can ask, and we will show you.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to what Camille said. She was asking for a proof. And I'm just thinking that scientific community, they like DNA. This, like, for us, is, we found it's the thing that is going to be interested because it's like scientific for them. And so in the documentary, they are talking about DNA, and they are also using saliva. How do you say saliva in English? Saliva. To add, to do the pigment. So what do you think? Do you think it would be possible? Maybe not today because the technology is maybe not enough good, but maybe advanced things. But maybe in the future it will be possible to find DNA?
Yeah, I think DNA is already a very developed technique, and they have found DNA in actually different things, in sediments, for example, in necklaces. There's a publication very recent, or to be published briefly, that they found ancient DNA in a necklace from the prehistory. So I think it won't take that long to somebody find DNA in a rock art pigment. It's technology evolves really fast, so it's just a matter of time. And researchers like DNA because you can't discuss against DNA. It's there. It's like a proof, Lithics, you can discuss lithics, you can discuss figures, you can discuss even datations, you can discuss. But if you actually found the DNA of a person in something, there's not much. Exactly.
Just to addict, for example, the question of just females make this kind of verse was really discussed, because also depend of the way that you make that. If you make it in a like blowing in the top, the hand became much more thin, much more pequena, small. And it's also a big discussion how to measure this, and how to measure the hands of the Neanderthals, for example, that we don't have. No? Usually we don't have the hand preserved, the bones. So how to compare this? And if we look, another question, if you look to our hands, if I put my hand near Sarah's hand,
I win.
Yeah. So I'm the female in this case. So this is just an example of how many discussions we could have with these kind of approaches. In fact, the ADN will solve much of them because we will know very well if it's a Neanderthal, if it's a sapien, if it's a transition community, if it's a man, if it's a female, if it's a young, if it's a older. So also the shamanic question will arise if we found ADN of young people, they were not shamanics. So the technology will help us a lot, the question of the mind.
Yeah.
I've watched this video before, and now watching it again, I'm seeing new things I didn't see before.
Good.
So to speak as an aspiring rock art specialist, to answer Shubham, when it comes to rock art, I think everything is based on interpretations. Why? We don't know. We didn't live with those people. We were not there when they were creating this art. And they are just interpretations on how, as to why in a cave, why in a closed place, or why in the open air. It's all about interpretation, right? And on the shamanic part, to speak on the shamanism, I think I would like, I don't know if Rufus is here, but it's not here. So when it comes to shamanism, I think it's based on spirituality of indigenous people. So maybe there should be research done to try and interpret as to these species or these humans that occupied those caves, were they part of practicing a specific spirituality, not religion, spirituality. So I think if the scientists who are DNA drunk can help us to try and see if, because of, we need to also understand that they also, there's where I read somewhere where they said rock art was looked at as a first evidence of human intelligence, I think. I've read somewhere where it says that, I don't know where, but anyway. So rock art is seen as an evidence of the first human, the evidence of human intelligence. So whether it's Neanderthals that done it, or is it sapiens, I would like to take part in that debate. And also we need to also take into consideration the dwellers, the moving, because of the people that, the humans that created this rock art. Where I come from, we know that people that create rock art in these caves or these open air were hunter-gatherers. As some of them were depicting some hunting scenes that they were doing, so it might also be linked to shamanism, I think, because of there's a cave that I've been looking at, but it's in South Africa. They depict mostly an antelope of an eland, like an animal.
Yeah.
It's depicting a hunting scene, and most of them, when they were doing this rock art, they were entering into trances, and they would see the spirits guiding them, or their ancestors showing them this specific animal to hunt, and then they would end up depicting it so that they can remember as to, this is our spirit animal, and this is what we need to go look for in order for us to be healed, or in order for us to create medicine or rites of passages or something like that. So I think when you think about rock art, think about interpretation. That's all, and then you won't get confused.
Okay. I have a question. I don't know if I understood well. In the movie, they said the kind of handprint was only found in caves in Europe, right?
No, they can find hand stencils you can find in the world, open air or in caves. In Europe, mainly, the big majority of hand stencils that we have are in caves and are associated to very early times.
Okay. That was the part, because they said this early was...
This project was focused on the hand stencils of Europe.
Okay.
And in accordance with what you're saying, from this project, there was a book compiled with all hand stencils that they were able to make the documentation in Iberian Peninsula. All hand stencils that exist in caves of Paleolithic times are in this book from Iberian Peninsula, and it's free to download on web, okay? So you can just basically find HANDPAS book. It's also in the library of the museum, and you can download and check all the catalog. It's very interesting depiction.
Just to edit, one of the points of the first art is starting to collect this information in all the entire world. We can give you in the first, you are the first ones to know. I will tell Sarah, I don't know. In this project, we also found, for example, new hand stencils in Sardinia that were never identified. Now we will make all the scientific process, characterize, try to date. It's not easy, that we know. It's a volcanic shelter. So we don't have these methods to be applied in that case. But we have a lot of new informations that will add data to this documentary that was made 10 years ago.
You are in YouTube, you know that.
Just a little curiosity about a non-expert. They were talking about like mutilated handprint as well.
Yeah.
Like, is it something common that you can find everywhere, and like, is it a specific part like they were showing in the documentary, like the little finger, for example, so that basically it could be interpreted as not necessarily like he lost his little finger, but it could be some symbolism that could be found.
Yes, yeah? It's quite. I mean, it's not the majority, but it's quite common to find hand stencils that 1 or 2 fingers are missing, and there is this debate that if it's a mutilated hand, okay, somebody that lost fingers and why, or a symbolic thing, which is even more interesting. But actually, it happens a lot.
Or just a mistake of the painting. You move the finger and you blow, and Queen one did. Why not?
Geologists, seriously.
Of course. You should put all the questions in the table.
They have the most terrible interpretations, always.
Yeah. I need to say only one thing. I disagree with you. Because I think it's not one of the first, because there are a lot of evidences of intelligence, like lithics or choices to do like one kind of lithics, because
Fire.
You need.
He was
one of, yeah, okay.
You say
okay.
the first. Now it's one of.
Okay. Neanderthals species, they were a little advanced one, because it's proved their brain capacity was 1,500 to 600 cc, cubic centimeter, but Homo sapiens is 1,500 cubic centimeter. So we can compare. They were almost like their capacity was like us, and they were practicing funerary ceremony.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. There are some early evidences that Neanderthals did some symbolic
they were practicing
behavior.
Yes, and they were keeping the stuffs like jewelry, necklace, and flowers. That's the main thing. Now we visit some of our ancestors, we take flowers. And they were keeping the flowers with the dead body. I'll just, I'm not going to too much scientific. And pottery, not pottery, sorry. And some specific stuffs they were keeping with that body. And this shows maybe they were, could be, they were believing after death life or something. It's a kind of respect for their ancestors. That also we can link to shamanic, like they were practicing something. Thank you.
The video was shot at which place? Was it in?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Like the video, it was like the video was made, okay, where you all were the actor and actresses,
Actresses is a big word for what I did. I dressed up.
You played the role.
Okay.
So, which place was it? I would like to know. If
To where we did it.
Yes.
Yeah, all the video was shot in the Fuentes de León caves. Actually, they are really old archaeological sites in Spain, in the south of Extremadura, and they are quite famous caves, not only for archaeological sites, but for tourism. It's one of the sites that Virginia is working on her PhD now. There are archaeological sites, but without rock art. They don't have rock art. They only have the archaeological context. And it's a beautiful place where there's a small river stream in front of the caves. So we took the landscape and the caves to make these recreations.
In fact, it's one of the excavations that is open to you participate in September. We will share that information near soon.
July,
sorry. September is, September is usually that.
for the archaeological
Thank
students. Yeah. Go, Nagasi.
Okay, thank you so much. So, with regards to this hand image, I think it's in different places. For one thing, it's in different places, and also temporally also of different time. Yeah. So, how is it going to be interpreted? Is it going to be an independent invention of different, at different places, or is it because people were, humans were communicating each other that they have this kind of universal figure, and how is this going to be interpreted? Thank you so much.
That's a good question, Agassi. You made a good point. The earliest dates that we have for this figure are 66,000 in Maltravieso, but there are other sites that the datation goes until 22,000. So, first question, did they make the same figure for 40,000 years, It's a type of figure that goes across long time and a big territory. I think, yes, ideas travel as well, okay? And the hand stencil, it's a quite specific and, for me, special figure, because it's your identity, basically. You're putting, it's like, even today, we use our fingerprints for many things, right? It's your hand that is there on the wall. It's not a hunting scene, like Shanti was talking about. It's not a bull, a horse, or even a human figure that appears later. But it's the most closed thing of a person putting their own identity in the wall. So for me, it's a very personal figure, You're not putting somebody else's brand there. You're putting your own. That's very specific. How can we interpret it? That is hard. That's why it's such a special figure. But yes, you're right. It goes in a big territory for a long time. Yeah. And I think it gives even a bigger difficulty to interpret, because hunting scenes, animals, we can kind of understand a lot, right? It's what, are they eating these animals or just hunting? Is it symbolic or it's a reality? Okay, we can go in many ways with other figures. But with the hand stencils, for me, I think that the part of the mystery is why it's so interesting. People are putting their brands on the wall. How did where did this started? Well, according to the scientific data in Iberian Peninsula, because they are right now what we have oldest datations, but it goes until 22,000, for example. This is a big difference, 40,000 years old. But right now, researchers are making some study cases, like in Maltravieso, why they were putting specifically this figure on the caves. And in that cave in particular, you have a pattern, okay? But many other sites, for in Castillo, these are the first figures, along with dots and lines, very simple things, and with a hand stencil. And then came all the animals, all the complex figures. So well, there's a lot to work on the interpretation.
Personally, I think it's very easy. It's the first evidence that people began using drugs.
It was also put in question. You have a lot of studies related, for example, with this alteration of consciousness related. Usually the first attempt is the consumption of mushrooms or, as you saw there, the shamanic contact with the cave. But in fact, now studies related with the quantity of CO2 inside the cave can alter our state of mind. So the approach of new disciplines in these studies is really important, because in fact when they talk about this, they were taking drugs to make shamanic things. The guy of the conservation of the cave, this happened to me. When I stayed then more than 1 hour inside the cave, I became very busy. Why? Because they don't have too much air inside, and it started to become with altered state of mind.
Okay, but be careful with any kind of interpretation, okay? Sometimes an interpretation works for a specific site, doesn't explain it all, okay? It happened in a specific cave that somebody that can't stay there for a long time, or it faints. Okay, on that particular place, okay? But this goes for any kind of interpretation. It can work for a play, one specific spot, but not for everything, okay?
I just want to understand better, like, you were talking about the limitations of Neanderthals, like before we had like more proof and everything, that it was very probable that it was them because of the tools and the size of their brains. But as far as I remember, I think I've read that they already had this kind of symbolic way of thinking. And I think for me, like when I see those paintings, for me it's not the technical part that it's the most difficult to reach, but the interpretation and the symbolic part. So I would like to know, like, why is there this question? Why is there a limit for Neanderthals to do? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, good question. That's a good question. Actually, this is the basic discussion regarding this theme. For 100 years, we had data from Neanderthals, and a narrative was made, okay? Neanderthals had the same kind of lithic tools for a long time. They were adapted to a specific context. We didn't see much symbolic behavior from them until recently with new contexts. And then, as human beings always do, but Homo sapiens, us, we are much better because we can do much more things in the different ways. Obviously, rock art, it's ours. Okay, it is, you know, we put everything in boxes, and the rock art box was, without a doubt, or without proof or evidence on contrary, was thought to be Homo sapiens. Even because, until now, until this new method, as they explain, the dates that we had was Homo sapiens dates, okay, with the carbon-14 that they were talking about and everything. A new method normally takes new questions. And the appearance of new dates much earlier than Homo sapiens actually start questioning everything that we knew about Neanderthals. And like Sima said, yeah, but actually there was already some evidence of symbolic behavior. You know, not big proof, but we know that they took care of their dead. We knew that they did necklaces and, you know, things that they don't need to survive. It goes from the symbolic point of view. So can we actually start thinking that they also did, you know, marks on the wall or symbolic things on the wall? What you are actually questioning it's the discussion. You know, then you have all the researchers that actually cannot see evidence that Neanderthals did rock art, and others that actually are a little more open-minded. Why not? You know, what are the somebody asked, what is the evidences that Neanderthals didn't do rock art? What is the evidence that they did? You know, actually you have to question on the two ways.
I have a question. That why the people in that period, how to say, used painting this way to record or have the supernatural connection, because I think at that time they are just busy with hunting. You know, it's survive. Yeah, it's because I think painting like this art is a little bit opposite with the practical thing, and it's a little bit complex to do it, because we need to make the colors and use the tools, and it's a little bit complex. Why they use painting? Because not only in Europe and in Africa, in Asia,
all over the world.
Yeah, why? I just wonder this creation.
Well, okay. I'm gonna say something. Making a tool to make a paint or an engraving, it's not more complex than making a tool to hunt. Generally speaking, I don't see it's more difficult to make something to make a paint than to hunt. You need skills for both that can be developed. Why? That's the $1 million question, right? We know that, okay, taking aside this question of the datations of 66,000, because it's really like the first one's really old, we know that around 40,000 years ago, more or less at the same time, in different places of the world, people start making symbolic designs on walls, on rock, both open air or in caves or in shelters, using paintings or engraving, scratching on walls. We know that more or less at the same time, people start making this artistic imagery. Now, why? That is the big question.
The question, in fact, is that what happens in the brain, if it's Neanderthal, if it's Sapiens, or another species. We have a lot of different species that, in fact, we are not different species. If we interbred, we are not a different species. So we are the same species with different specifications. Okay. And what will answer to your questions, in fact, will be the genetic. What happened with these transference of genes that make the brain have this symbolic waste of time. It was more or less what we were asking. Why they waste of time doing art if they need to hand? In fact, what happens in the brain?
That still happens today,
yeah,
because today we cannot think about prehistoric people as being that different from us. It's us. Okay, the needs, the beliefs, the concerns, the fears, they had it the same. Why from a specific time of they started? That's something that we didn't reach that yet. But at the same time, don't forget that rock art cannot be seen as, oh, they had free time so they did it. Rock art as today can be used as a political message, a geographical marker, a social message, a social identity. Everything that some researchers work on this thing, everything that we can actually, or we use art today, we can actually think that would be used since the beginning. And there are many studies on that. Patterns of specific figures that in a specific region can be a marker of that region, or a group, or an identity of a specific group of people. And the other side, another different rock art was being made, or only engravings, or only paintings, or both. why they were putting on the same place rock art for 10,000 years, you know? So there's a lot of symbolism involved, actually.
Can I add something about what was said, Diana, before? We have the methodologies that were applied before and are applied still now, but with additional methodologies, has some limits. The carbon dating has the limits of 50,000 years. So it's, you have a limit and you are not able to date more than this. So who say to you that it's, who could say it's that date and it's not before? No. So additional methodology could help to improve this data, and this is what Sarah was saying before. And also, we know that they will use the same tools, but as us, if we are comfortable with a tool, we don't need to change, no? So probably it's not it's not no evolution, but it's like I'm comfortable and I don't need to improve these tools, so why change if this is working? For me, it's like, could be also this. It's, we can use some, like the lytic tools to explain this part, because probably they were okay like this, I think.
Okay, I have an opportunity to visit Gargas Cave in South France. So far I have understood and I have observed, and our teachers explained, like there are some missing fingers. So it's an ongoing debate.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of interpretation. Like someone is explaining that it's a kind of sign language, first sign language in this area. Like it's the this area is around, the cave is around 30 to 35,000 years old. So there is a possibility of Neanderthal and modern Homo sapiens like coexistence or something like that. And someone is explaining like that it is kind of due to the frostbite, these fingers may be missing. And some, like for my observation, it was like that. It was not so many, too much high. Like as a child or a baby can maybe kind of thing, like I don't know. So
how would you explain it in the south of Spain?
Yeah. So
that there was no that cold.
So
see, good, but again, one interpretation doesn't works for all the contexts. Okay, all the questions we can make. Obviously, that's somebody was, you know, in a hard condition, lost fingers. Okay, or it's a kind of sign language or some kind of a signal.
Signals.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that has the same meaning on the other side.
Yes. So, like, scientists are trying to resolve the problem. So, as a novice of or a very young on this research stream, how can we conclude these kind of questions? Like, there is a kind of a foggy answer. Like, everyone is interpreting in their own way. They have the reasons. I do believe that they have reasons. But how can we definitely concrete or confine this answer? This is my question.
Conclusions in rock art. Well, this is a personal opinion. I think that we cannot look only for the rock art. Okay, studying rock art and interpreting rock art, it's really hard, but it's one piece of the puzzle. And many researchers actually do it wrong. They only look for one part of the puzzle and try to make answers from it. For me, rock art is a piece of the puzzle. The same person that did that hand stencil made the lithics, hunted, lived, had kids, okay, left a lot of traces. So I think maybe we won't have the answers right now. Maybe we will have it in the future. But mainly, we have to look at the entire puzzle, not just for one piece, not, you know, not interpret rock art just for the rock art.
This is one step for this join new that came from not the prehistory archaeological background, like Apheleia do. Come, express your ideas, join to discussion, is what we want, what we pretend to do, is putting this question not only in the prehistoric specialists, but go take your disciplines, take your knowledge, and help us to not achieve an answer, but to develop the idea. Not art, just is art. Have a lot of information that was dismissed in the past.
Okay, thank you so much. So I want to add something to what Raju was saying. Just there is, I think, a universal problem with rock art. So one thing is, because in Ethiopia we have rock artists, but the problem is people study the rock art just as an art. They don't integrate with the other aspect of archaeology. So they are dealing with only one thing. Just there is an art, so they describe that, but nothing to the local culture or to the other aspects of archaeology. So it helps if you integrate with the other aspect of archaeology. That may not be enough even, but it helps to have some sort of plausible interpretation. Otherwise, it's going to be the most difficult aspect of archaeology, as he is saying. So it is an effort to create something, to create a plausible interpretation. But obviously, it's difficult, I think. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you said it all.
I had a question quite related to some of the students, and you mentioned that there was some skepticism regarding the Neanderthal making rock art based on their brains. So is that just based on the way the crania was shaped, or were there actual studies analyzing the shapes and relating it to the specific parts of the brain that could be responsible for symbolic behavior, which were quite smaller than those corresponding parts in sapient brains? Like, were the differences in the size of those specific lobes of the brain smaller, and that hence they concluded that Neanderthals would be lesser likely to produce symbolic behavior? Or was it simply just biased, I don't know, just based on looking at the cranium?
It was a mixture of things. Like somebody said before, we didn't have dates on rock art that would go that further, that old, to reach the Neanderthals. And then regarding the Neanderthals, I don't know how it is talked today, but for example, when I learned about Neanderthals, there was a very specific thing saying that the brains were big, but they were different shape. And the part where creativity and imagination is set in the front lobe, Neanderthals have it little different. So it was like a rule. They do not have capacity of making abstract thinking or imaginary or symbolic thought. Okay, it has changed over time, but I didn't learn about Neanderthals that long ago. Okay, so this is a new discussion that it puts in proof everything that we already knew, yeah? This is us also stretching the boundary. So it was the skepticism was basically a group of things regarding the skeleton of Neanderthal, the behavior traces that we have from them, the technology that we have from Neanderthals, and also the scientific data that we had. Where is rock art being dated? The oldest so far was 36,000 in France. And then with this new project, 41. Okay, so we are applying new method that is actually stretching the boundaries. If you stretch the boundaries, you start making other questions. And now when you go to 6,000, it's, oops, this is only Neanderthal. What about now? From the skeleton point of view, can we actually know if they had abstract thinking or, or symbolic thinking? Yes or no? So it comes with many other questions. The Angel.
How have the researchers come to infer that what they have found in the cave are proof of a shamanistic religion. It's not that ethnocentric bias. I mean, you see something that is there seems 10,000s of years, and you say it's shamanistic because it's like a bias in which you have one way direction of cultural evolution.
The researchers didn't say it was shamanistic. Shamanistic was put as one hypothesis to explain these specific hand stencils in a wall. Okay, all the discussion was there are a lot of different interpretations. One interpretation that can be accessed is through shamanic processes, and then they explain what would be the hypothesis. But a proof of shamanic activity, it's really, really hard, especially in these cases. So it was an hypothesis, okay? Sorry.
No. It's a lot of time the interpretation are based on ethno-archaeology or ethno-evidences. You are able to see that there are, how Shanti was saying before, that there are a lot of community that used to do the same practices, not the same, but similar, and are useful to try to interpret it.
Yeah, but there is one catch. Virginia is right, but for example, shamanic theory started mainly through the studies of rock art of South Africa, for example, or in Australia, where there are still people and indigenous communities that still do rock art and explain to you what they are doing and why they are doing it. Okay, some of researchers try to make this transport this knowledge to a European context, which is really hard because we don't have that connection with ethnography. Okay, so that's where this is one hypothesis of interpretation that in Europe it's really hard to work with than different contexts.
Yeah, for this I would say that this is from the beginning of this interpretation is this one. But obviously, it's a different context, different places, It's an interpretation. It is what we were saying.
Yeah, sorry. Is it okay?
Go.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, now, for example, your team, you have this project, you have the laboratory, you have all this new data. What is the method? Because you want to bring to the scientific community science's evidence, proof. What method are you using to spread your new discovery, your data, article, paper, books, documentary? What do you think you have to use to spread what you know now?
Okay, well, First Start project, actually, the first step was to make it, to replicate the method in many other places, okay? One of the first points of the discussion was, you just have like one or two. It's not enough to change paradigm. Okay, so First Start project started with 2 caves, one in Portugal and one in Spain, Escoral and Maltravieso, and then we added 28 other caves in Spain. So we are replicating the same method of taking the calcite on the top of specific figures, hand stencils, lines, dots, what we think it's the oldest, and make a big program of datation of these figures using not only one laboratory but 2 laboratories. If they have the same result, it's more scientific, reliable of being right, okay? This is the first step. First Start project is literally as we speak working, okay? We did the big campaigns last year. We are now with all the material in laboratories, We are making different methods, not only the datation, but taking samples of the pigments to know what some of the figures we actually have to prove they are made by humans, okay, because they are really, really soft. Virginia is taking samples of the sediments, also to try to see the environment and to make a connection with who did the paintings in what time, okay? Different methodologies mixed in many other places. And then, scientifically speaking, we will publish the results in scientific papers, in books, in congresses. First Art Project, we are, for the last 2 years, talking a lot of this project, involving as much more sites and people as we can, different disciplines, okay, geologists, archaeologists, chemistry, datations, physics, different laboratories from different countries. This is also important. And then, as soon as we have the results, to actually pass through a peer review process. So our peers will evaluate our work, and then we publish. This is an example of the book that I was telling. The first part of this big discussion, of one of the first parts, was transformed in the book. That actually then can be, the scientific publication can be made with this kind of projects, a documentary. How do you explain to people this discussion? It's not going to be with a scientific paper.
For example, this is an example of how to reach a public that maybe doesn't have a scientific background. So how do you manage to bring this question to a kind of audience and a public like this?
Yeah, so exactly. This is an example. It's not only how we're going to publish scientifically and we don't care. That's not the correct way. We do it in the scientific papers. We do it in didactic books or other type of books or scientific books or documentaries on recreations. There are a big amount of different ways that we can actually do it.
I think Charlene is provoking you, the group that will work with us. We can use, in fact, the Prehistory Festival to put this also in the mainstream of all the people. Get out of the prehistoric specialists after the peer review scientific acceptance. We could, in fact, start to use this knowledge that becomes very closed inside the universities, inside the researchers, and put it in the global warming and the altered climatic change. We could put also this question in the daily life. We should finish.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think it was a really nice discussion. Thank you all. Now we go to the ETM. You have a little bit. I don't know. I think it's 4.
Yeah, you have a little break, coffee break.
A little break, and we start
at
5 in the ETM. So get a little bit earlier, 10 to 5, to be organized, and then we have the workshop of Nada Elias. Thank you.
Thank you, guys, everybody. Thank you.